There is a secret envy that lies at the heart of the Eldar, a jealousy kept hidden from the race of men behind masks of ancient wisdom and fair faces that do not age. When a man looks upon an elf, he sees a being untouched by the ravages of time, a creature of light who will never know the slow rot of the grave or the indignity of frailty. The man feels a bitterness in his heart, cursing his own short span, his brief 80 or 90 years of breath, before the eternal darkness takes him. He calls his mortality the doom of men, a punishment for some forgotten sin. But the wisest of the elves know better. They look upon the short, bright lives of men not with pity, but with a profound and terrifying longing. For they know the truth that the Valar whispered at the very dawn of the world. Death is not a curse. Death is a gift. It is the ultimate release, the permission to leave the circle of the world before it becomes a prison. For the Quendi, the firstborn, there is no such release. We are bound to the very atoms of this earth. As long as Arda lasts, we must last. We are sentenced to life without end, trapped within a reality that is slowly, inevitably dying around us. To understand the true horror of the elven condition in the later ages, one must strip away the poetry of the songs and the romance of the starlight. One must look at the cold, hard biology of what it means to be immortal in a mortal world. One must understand the anatomy of the trap. In the high philosophy of the Eldar, a living being is composed of two distinct elements, the Fëa and the Hroa. The Fëa is the soul, the spirit, the indwelling fire. It is indestructible, born from the secret fire of Eru Ilúvatar himself. It is a thing of pure energy, of memory, and of will. Unlike the souls of men, which seek to leave the world and travel beyond the circles of the universe, the Elven Fëa loves the world. It clings to it. It grows stronger with every passing year. Every sunrise witnessed, every song sung, every sorrow endured adds weight and power to the Fëa. It is an accumulation of consciousness that expands without limit. The Hroa is the body. It is the house in which the spirit dwells. It is made of the flesh and blood of Arda, the matter of the earth itself. In the blessed realm of Valinor, in the west, this duality is not a problem. There, the land is alive with the light of the Valar. The matter of that land is unmarred, perfect, and sustained by a power that defies entropy. In Valinor, the body can endure the fire of the spirit forever, for the land itself supports it, feeding the flesh with the same light that feeds the soul. But this is Middle-earth, and Middle-earth is a marred world. Long before the elves awoke by the waters of Cuiviénen, the Dark Lord Morgoth poured his malice into the very foundations of this continent. He tainted the gold, the silver, the water, and the stone. He introduced the Morgoth element, the tendency of all physical things to decay, to break, to fade. The Hroa of an elf is made of this tainted matter. It is resilient, certainly. It does not age like the flesh of men. It does not sicken with fever or wither with disease. But it is finite. Here lies the biological trap. As the millennia pass, 10,000 years, 20,000 years, the Fëa consumes life. It grows larger, hotter, more complex and more potent. It becomes a raging inferno of consciousness and memory. But the Hroa does not grow. It is static. And slowly, the spirit begins to consume the body that houses it. Imagine a fire burning inside a lantern made of paper. At first, the light is beautiful. It glows warmly through the screen, illuminating the darkness. But as the fire grows hotter, fed by the fuel of millennia, the paper begins to scorch. It becomes brittle. It becomes thin. Eventually, the fire burns right through it. This is the metabolic reality of the elf. They are burning themselves alive from the inside out. By the third age of Middle-earth, this process was already accelerating. This is why the High Elves appeared to glow with a strange inner light to the eyes of mortals. To a human, this looked like divinity, a sign of majesty and power. But to an Elven healer, it was a symptom. It was the Feyre shining through a Hroa that was wearing dangerously thin. It was the spirit straining against the leash of the flesh, trying to tear itself free. The pain of this existence is difficult to describe to a mortal mind. It is not a sharp pain, like a wound or a broken bone. It is a deep, resonant exhaustion. It is a weariness that settles in the marrow of the bones, a feeling of being stretched over too much time, like butter scraped over too much bread. The body becomes a heavy burden, a cage that feels increasingly claustrophobic to the expanding soul. The Elven smiths of Erygion, led by the master Celebrimbor, understood this terror better than anyone. They looked ahead and saw their doom written in the fabric of the world. They saw that inevitably their bodies would fade until they became houseless spirits, invisible ghosts wandering the world, impotent and forgotten, while the race of men inherited the solid earth. They forged the rings of power not to conquer kingdoms or dominate armies, but to conquer time itself. The three rings, Narya, Nenya, and Vilya, were preservation devices. They were metaphysical dams built to hold back the river of entropy. Inside the radius of Vilya in Rivendell, or Nenya in Lothlorien, the biological clock was halted. The marring of Arda was kept at bay. The Hroa ceased to fade, and the Feyre could rest. For 3,000 years, the Elves lived in these bubbles of artificial timelessness. They cheated the biological trap. In Lorien, the leaves turned gold, but did not fall. The time of the Elder Days was preserved in amber. It was a false immortality, sustained by the artifice of the rings, but it allowed them to linger in Middle-earth, long past their natural expiration date. But every debt must be paid. When the One Ring was cast into the fires of Mount Doom, the power of the three was extinguished instantly. The dam broke, the protection evaporated. 3,000 years of delayed time crashed down upon the bearers of the rings and their people. The stasis ended, and the Grey Age began. For an elf who chose to remain in Middle-earth after the fall of Sauron, the biological trap snapped shut with finality. There were no more rings to slow the burning. There was no more magic to sustain the flesh. Now, the consumption would be rapid. Now, the Feyre would turn upon the Hroa with voracious hunger. The body, denied the preservation of the rings and denied the light of Valinor, became a dying vessel. They faced a stark choice: board the ships and flee to the west, surrendering the lands they loved, or stay and undergo the horrifying metamorphosis of the fading. Most left, but some were too proud, or too attached to their forests and their ruins. Some believed they could endure. They were wrong. For the biological trap of Arda yields to no will, not even the will of the firstborn. The flesh is weak, and the spirit is fire. And in the end, the fire always wins. If the physical decay of the elven form is a slow, quiet tragedy, the psychological toll of immortality is a violent and relentless trauma. To understand the mind of an elf in the Fourth Age, one must first understand the fundamental difference between the memory of the firstborn and the memory of the secondborn. The human mind is designed with a mercy mechanism: forgetfulness. For a man, time is a healer. The sharp edges of grief are blunted by the passing of years. A mother who loses a child will never stop mourning, but the visceral, sensory immediacy of the loss fades. The face of the beloved becomes a little less clear. The sound of their voice becomes a little harder to recall. This erosion of memory allows the human heart to scar over, to heal, and eventually to love again. It is a biological necessity for a race that dies so quickly. The Elven mind possesses no such mercy. They do not forget. Their memory is not a library where books can be misplaced or pages faded by the sun. Their memory is a living, constant state of presence. To an elf, the past is not a distant country. It is a parallel dimension that they inhabit simultaneously with the present. An elf who lived through the fall of Gondolin 10,000 years ago does not merely remember the fires and the screams. They can close their eyes and smell the smoke with the exact same olfactory clarity as if the city were burning around them in this very moment. They can hear the clash of steel and the cries of the dying with a fidelity that does not degrade. Every sorrow they have ever endured is as fresh and raw as the second it occurred. By the time an elf has lived for 10,000 years, witnessing the ruin of Beleriand, the sinking of Numenor, the war of the Last Alliance, and the War of the Ring, their mind has become a crowded graveyard. They carry the weight of every friend who fell, every oath that was broken, every forest that was burned by the machinery of war. The human capacity for trauma is limited by their lifespan. An elf's capacity for trauma is infinite. They are walking vessels of accumulated grief, carrying a burden that grows heavier with every rising sun. This creates a psychological state that the Lady Galadriel called the long defeat. It is a concept difficult for mortals to grasp. It is not simple depression. It is a profound, calcified certainty that everything beautiful will eventually be destroyed. An elf builder looks at a fortress of stone and sees its eventual ruin before the first block is laid. An elf singer composes a melody, knowing that one day there will be no ears left to hear it. They have seen the cycle repeat too many times to believe in permanence. They have seen the greatest works of their hands, the Silmarils, the cities of Nargothrond and Doriath, the realm of Eregion, reduced to dust and legends. This breeds a deep spiritual exhaustion, a weariness not of the body, but of the will. As the Fourth Age dawns and the dominion of men begins, this burden of memory forces the remaining elves into a state of dissociation. Mortals often perceive elves as cold, distant, or arrogant, staring through them as if they are not there. This is not arrogance, it is a defense mechanism. An elf sitting by a riverbank in the Fourth Age may appear to be doing nothing, but internally they are traveling. They are walking the streets of a city that has been under the ocean for 6,000 years. They are holding conversations with ghosts. They are taking refuge in the bright, vivid clarity of the past, because the present has become a grey, fading shadow. The present moment, for an ancient elf, is a cacophony of interference. When they look at a hill, they do not just see a hill. They see the fortress that stood there in the Second Age. They see the battle that leveled it. They see the lovers who met in its ruins in the Third Age. They see the sheep grazing there now. All of these realities are superimposed upon one another, creating a kaleidoscope of history that drowns out the now. The world of men feels thin and insubstantial compared to the density of their memories. They are trapped in a labyrinth of their own perfect recall, preferring the company of the dead to the company of the living. This leads to the inevitable alienation from the race of men. It is a tragedy of incompatible timescales. To an elf, a human life is a flicker, a spark that jumps from the fire and vanishes in the dark. It is terrifyingly fast. An elf might befriend a human, come to love them, and then blink, and the human is old. Another blink, and the human is dead. To love a mortal is to sign a contract for immediate heartbreak. It is to fall in love with a flower that blooms in the morning and rots by the evening. After a few thousand years of this, the elven heart begins to harden, not out of malice, but out of self-preservation. They stop learning the names of men. They stop investing in the political squabbles of kingdoms that rise and fall in the span of an elven afternoon. Humans become a blur of faces, a swarm of mayflies buzzing and dying in a frantic cycle that makes the elf feel dizzy and nauseated. This is why they retreat to the deep woods, to the places where the old world still lingers, where the trees live in a time signature that matches their own. But even the trees are not safe. The perfect memory of the elf becomes a curse when applied to the land itself. They remember the world when it was young and full of magic. They remember the light of the two trees of Valinor, even if only as a genetic echo in their spirit. They remember when the forest covered the continent from shore to shore. To look upon Middle-earth in the Fourth Age, a world of industry, deforestation, and fading magic, is to look upon a corpse. They see the scars on the land that mortals cannot see. They feel the absence of the entwives. They feel the silence of the stones. The psychological trap is as complete as the biological one. The elf cannot live in the present because the present is painful and dull. They cannot live in the future because the future belongs to men, a race they cannot connect with. They are forced to live entirely in the past, becoming curators of a museum that no one else visits. They become ghosts long before their bodies fade, haunting the ruins of their own history, trapped in a loop of remembrance that offers no comfort, only the relentless confirmation of what they have lost. They are beings of starlight trapped in a world of grey clay, and the weight of 10,000 years is crushing the light out of them, one memory at a time. As the Fourth Age dawns, the environment of Middle-earth undergoes a catastrophic metaphysical shift. To the race of men, this transition is invisible. They see only new lands to plough, new forests to cut, and new kingdoms to build. They call it the Age of Men, a time of progress and dominion. But to the lingering elves, this shift is felt as a physical assault. The very texture of reality begins to change. The dominion of the earth passes to humanity, and with it, the underlying frequency of the world shifts from the song of the Ainu to the cacophony of the machine. Magic, which was once a fundamental force of nature, as pervasive and essential as gravity, begins to recede. It drains out of the valleys and evaporates from the mountain peaks. The Ents fall silent, their slow, rumbling voices fading until they become merely tree-ish, indistinguishable from the timber they guard. The dwarves seal their doors of stone, retreating into the roots of the mountains to count their gold in the dark, severing their connection to the surface. The wild, chaotic, enchanted world becomes ordered, industrial, and oppressively mundane. For an elf, this shift is physically painful. They are creatures of the elder days, organisms that metabolize starlight and song. They require the ambient magic of ardor to thrive, just as a lung requires oxygen. As the world becomes more human, it becomes toxic to them. The air tastes flat and metallic. The water loses its voice. The trees stop speaking. Imagine an astronaut removing their helmet on a planet with a thin, dying atmosphere. They can still breathe, mechanically speaking, but every breath is a labor. They are constantly hypoxic, starving for an element that is no longer present in the environment. This is the elven experience in the Age of Men, a slow, relentless suffocation in the mundane. This environmental hostility drives the inevitable isolation. The The remaining elves do not retreat because they hate men. They retreat because they cannot survive the proximity. The growing cities of humanity are centers of a spiritual noise that is abrasive to elven senses. The clamor of commerce, the smoke of industry, the sheer, frantic speed of human ambition. It creates a dissonance that rattles the delicate harmony of the elven spirit. So they flee. They withdraw to the deepest woodlands, to the hidden valleys of linden, to the last pockets where the old world still lingers like mist in a hollow. They become refugees in the land of their birth, hiding in the shadows to escape the glare of the new sun. But the expansion of men is relentless. Humanity multiplies with a speed that terrifies the Eldar. They push into the wild places not with malice, but with a terrifying pragmatism. They cut down the ancient groves not to serve a dark lord, but to build ships and houses. They pave over the sacred clearings to build roads for their trade. For the lingering elf, watching from the tree line, this is not merely deforestation, it is a desecration. They are watching the geography of their immortality being erased. Every tree that falls is a link to the past that is severed. Every stream that is dammed is a voice silenced. They watch, helpless and invisible, as the map of Middle-earth is redrawn. The names of the land change. Sindarin names, filled with history and poetry, are replaced by the crude, functional names of Westron. The sacred places become quarries. The battlefields become pastures. The elf realizes with a growing horror that they no longer have a place in this world. They are anachronisms, relics of a bygone era that have overstayed their welcome. The world has moved on, and it has done so with a brutal indifference to the beauty that came before. This rejection by the world reinforces the fading process. As the environment rejects them, the elves reject the environment. The Fea, the spirit, realizes that it no longer belongs here. It begins to untether itself from the Hroa, the body. The connection between soul and flesh, already strained by the biological trap, begins to fray under the pressure of this alien world. The elf starts to become transparent to the reality around them. They are not yet invisible, but they are easily overlooked. A human hunter might walk past an elf standing in a glade and see only a play of light and shadow, a trick of the eye, a sudden movement of leaves. They are becoming myths in their own lifetime. To the men of the Fourth Age, elves are no longer the mighty lords who fought Balrogs and defied Sauron. They are reduced to fairy stories, to superstitions to frighten children. Don't go into the woods, the mothers tell their sons. There are spirits there. The elf hears this and feels a profound crushing loneliness. They are still flesh and blood. They still bleed. They still weep. But the world has decided they are ghosts long before they have died. And under the weight of that collective belief, under the crushing pressure of a world that has no room for magic, the elf begins to believe it too. They stop fighting the fade. They stop trying to hold onto their physical form. They surrender to the silence, allowing the mundane world to wash over them, eroding them stone by stone, until they are nothing more than a whisper in the wind that no one stops to hear. Now, the process accelerates. We enter the stage of physical dissolution. For the elves who have lingered too long in the age of men, the fading ceases to be a metaphor for cultural decline and becomes a terrifying physiological reality. It is a biological cascade, a failure of the binding energy that holds the spirit to the flesh. The Hroa, the physical body, unable to withstand the pressure of the expanding Fea and starved of the magical sustenance of the elder days, begins to lose its cohesion. It is not dying in the human sense. It is not rotting or ceasing to function. It is sublimating, It is transforming from matter into memory. It begins with a loss of density. The elf finds that their interaction with the physical world requires a conscious exertion of will. Where once they walked upon the earth with the grace of the firstborn, leaving light footprints, now they find they leave no footprints at all. They walk across a field of fresh snow, and the crust remains unbroken. They step upon dry leaves, and there is no sound of crushing. To a romantic mind, this sounds like a supernatural gift, a mastery of stealth. To the elf, it is a horror. It is the first sign that the earth is letting them go. Gravity, the most fundamental law of the physical realm, begins to lose its hold on them. They feel untethered, light-headed, as if a strong wind could blow them off the surface of the world and into the void. Simple acts become momentous struggles. To pick up a cup of wine requires the elf to focus their entire being, channeling their spirit to solidify their fingers enough to grasp the clay. If their concentration wavers for a second, the cup slips through their hand as if their flesh were made of smoke. They begin to feel like ghosts, haunting their own lives. They sit in chairs they cannot fully feel. They lie on beds that offer no resistance. The solid, reassuring friction of reality is replaced by a slippery, elusive texture. The world feels like it is made of oil and glass, impossible to grip, impossible to hold. Then comes the loss of sensory input. Because the body is the interface between the soul and the world, as the body fades, the senses dim. This is the stage of sensory deprivation, a slow descent into a numb, grey existence. The elf stops feeling temperature. The biting cold of a midwinter frost becomes a distant, intellectual concept rather than a physical sensation. The heat of the noon sun is no longer felt as warmth on the skin. It is merely a brightness in the eyes. The nerve endings, those millions of tiny bridges between the self and the universe, are burning out. They stop tasting food. The Lember's bread, the wine of Dorwinion, the water of the mountain springs, it all turns to ash in their mouths, not because the food has spoiled, but because the tongue can no longer interpret the signal of flavor. They stop eating, not out of choice, but because the Hroa no longer requires physical fuel. It is being sustained entirely by the burning consumption of the Fëa. They become self-cannibalizing engines of spirit, surviving on the energy of their own souls. They stop sleeping. The separation between the waking world and the world of dreams dissolves completely. An elf in this stage exists in a permanent twilight state, a hallucination where the memories of the past are as vivid as the reality of the present. They might stand in a forest clearing for 100 years, unmoving, eyes open, lost in a dream of the first age, while the trees grow and die around them. To a human observer, they would appear catatonic, a statue carved of pale stone. But inside, the mind is racing, trapped in a loop of perfect recall, unable to distinguish between what is real and what is remembered. Eventually, the opacity of the flesh fails. The elf becomes translucent to the eyes of mortals. This is not true invisibility, not yet. It is a trick of the light. The human eye, which evolved to perceive the solid, dangerous world of survival, simply slides off the fading elf. The brain refuses to process the anomaly. A man might look directly at a fading elf and see only a shimmer of heat, or a patch of mist, or a play of shadows among the trees. The elf screams at them, waves their hands, tries to make contact, but the man sees nothing. He shivers, pulls his cloak tighter, and mutters about bad air or haunted woods. This is the birth of folklore. The stories of fairies and ghosts and spirits of the wood are not inventions of the human imagination. They are the misinterpretations of a tragic reality. The ghost in the ruins is not a dead soul. It is a living elf who has faded so far that they can no longer reflect light. They are still there. This is the ultimate cruelty of the condition. They have not ascended to a higher plane of existence. They have not gone to the halls of Mandos. They are still occupying the same physical coordinates as the humans who walk through them. Imagine the horror of being trapped in a solitary confinement cell that encompasses the entire world. You can see the people around you. You can hear their conversations. You can see the grandchildren of the men you once knew playing in the fields. But you cannot touch them. You cannot speak to them. You are screaming behind a wall of glass that is infinitely thick and infinitely silent. You are a spectator in your own world, reduced to a passive observer of a history you can no longer influence. The elf, once a lord of the earth, a being of power and majesty who could challenge gods, is reduced to a lingerer. They become wanderers, drifting through the cities of men like smoke. They gather in the places of strong emotion, hospitals, battlefields, graveyards, drawn to the heat of human feeling because they can no longer generate their own warmth. They linger in the shadows of the world, unseen and unheard, slowly going mad from the isolation. The fair, now almost entirely unhoused, begins to fray. Without the anchor of the body, the spirit becomes vulnerable to the winds of the unseen world. They are no longer protected by the laws of physics. They are exposed to the metaphysical currents of ardor, to the call of the necromancers, to the hunger of things that dwell in the void. The fading is complete. The elf has ceased to be a biological entity and has become a spectral one. And in that transition, the last nobility of the elder is stripped away, leaving only a naked, starving soul in the dark. We have arrived at the darkest chapter of the Elven history, a chapter that is rarely spoken of in the songs of the West. It is the story of those who refuse the summons. When an elf's body is finally consumed by the fire of their spirit, or when it is destroyed by violence, the Fëa is released. By the design of Eru Ilúvatar, these naked spirits are summoned to the halls of Mandos in the West, there to wait, to reflect, and eventually to be re-embodied in Valinor. It is a calling of peace, a gravity that pulls the weary soul toward rest. But the summons is not a command. It is an invitation. And because the elves possess free will, they can refuse. Those who refuse the call, those who cling obstinately to Middle-earth, even after their bodies have disintegrated, become the Lingerers. They are the houseless spirits. In the ancient tongue, they are the unbodied, and their existence is a cautionary tale of how the highest nobility can fall into the deepest corruption. To be a lingerer is to exist in a state of naked vulnerability. Without the thrower to shield it, the spirit is exposed to the raw metaphysical winds of the world. They are stripped of their agency. They can no longer move stone or wield steel. They can no longer speak with a voice that vibrates the air. They are pure consciousness floating in a void, drifting on the currents of the unseen world. But they are not alone in that void. The unseen is inhabited by other things, remnants of the shadow, malice that was poured into the world in the beginning, and the hungry wills of the dark. The lingerer begins their existence in the unseen with a sense of defiance. They believe they have conquered death. They believe they are the guardians of the land, watching over their forests like silent sentinels. But slowly, the isolation begins to twist them. The Fëa, evolved to exist in symbiosis with a body, cannot remain sane without one. It craves the sensory input of the physical world. It craves warmth. It craves the friction of existence. A terrible, gnawing hunger takes root in the core of the spirit. a hunger for life. This hunger drives the lingerer toward the living. They drift toward the settlements of men, drawn like moss to the warmth of a fire. They hover around the hearts of mortals, feeding on the excess emotions of the living. When a man is consumed by rage, or a woman is drowning in grief, the lingerer is there, drinking the energy like wine. They become parasites of the soul, spiritual leeches that attach themselves to the aura of the living to sustain their own fading consciousness. But the corruption goes deeper. In the texts of the wise, it is written that some lingerers, driven mad by the envy of the flesh, seek to do the unthinkable. They seek to usurp. They find a human whose will is weak, or a youth whose mind is open, and they attempt to possess the body. They try to evict the rightful soul and take the hroa for themselves. This is the ultimate abomination. For an elf, one of the firstborn, to stoop to the level of a body thief is a fall from grace so profound, it rivals the kinslayings of old. Most fail. They lack the strength to overcome a living soul. But in the attempt, they become something foul. They become the evil spirits of human folklore, the poltergeists and demons that plague the nightmares of men. They are not demons of the void. They are the shattered remnants of elven lords and ladies, twisted by time and refusal into monsters of envy. They whisper commands into the minds of the weak. They incite violence so they can vicariously feel the rush of adrenaline. They revel in pain because pain is, at least, a feeling. There is a darker peril still. By refusing the protection of Valinor, the lingerer leaves themselves open to the necromancer. The Dark Lord Sauron may be gone, but the arts he taught remain. There are sorcerers among men, practitioners of the black arts, who know how to communicate with the unseen. To these necromancers, a houseless elf is not a tragedy. It is a resource. It is a battery of spiritual power waiting to be harvested. Through dark rituals and words of binding, a necromancer can enslave a lingerer. They can trap the wandering spirit in a prison of wards, forcing it to reveal the secrets of the elder days, or using its energy to fuel their own spells. Imagine the horror of it. A being who once saw the light of the two trees, who once walked in the gardens of Doriath, now reduced to a bound slave in the dungeon of a mortal hedge wizard, forced to haunt a tomb or guard a treasure for a master they despise. This is the fate of many who stayed. They thought they were choosing freedom. They chose a slavery worse than death. Even those who escape the necromancers cannot escape the entropy of their own minds. Without the structure of the body to organize thought, the lingerer's mind begins to unspool. They lose the ability to distinguish between self and other. They forget their names. They forget why they stayed. They become elemental forces of localized sorrow. A lingerer might haunt a specific waterfall for 5,000 years, weeping for a loss they can no longer remember. They become the genius loci, the spirits of the place, but there is no intelligence left in them, only a repetitive loop of emotion. They are feared by the very land they sought to protect. The animals sense them and flee. The trees withdraw their roots. The earth itself seems to recoil from the unnatural presence of a naked soul. The lingerer finds that in their attempt to cling to the Middle Earth, they have become an infection within it. They are foreign bodies in the bloodstream of the world. And yet, the door remains open. The summons of Mandos does not expire. At any moment, the lingerer could turn away from the shadow, accept their defeat, and seek the path to the west. But pride is the hardest chain to break. To accept the summons now would be to admit that their long vigil was meaningless. It would be to admit that they were wrong, and so they persist. They linger in the rain, unseen and unloved. watching the dominion of men build cities over their graves. They become the static in the air, the cold spot in the room, the shadow in the corner of your eye. They are the sad, terrifying proof that immortality without grace is not a gift, but a damnation. They are the ghosts of ardor, and they are starving. The ages have turned. The fourth age of men has given way to the fifth, the sixth, and perhaps the seventh. The geography of Middle Earth has been buried beneath layers of concrete, asphalt, and steel. The forests where the Noldor once hunted are now grids of suburban housing. The rivers where the Sindar sang are now channeled into industrial canals. The world has been disenchanted. It has been measured, mapped, and strip-mined of its magic. For the few elves who remain, the last, stubborn tatters of the firstborn, this is the final severing. It is the moment where the incompatibility between their nature and the reality of the world becomes absolute. There comes a breaking point for every lingerer. There is a moment when the pain of the mundane becomes greater than the fear of the unknown. The noise of the modern world, the electronic hum, the psychic static of billions of human minds, the relentless aggression of a machine-driven civilization, becomes a torture that not even the strongest will can endure. The elf realizes that they are not merely invisible. They are alien. They are trying to breathe water. They are trying to exist in a vacuum. The Fëa, exhausted by thousands of years of solitary confinement in the unseen, finally screams for release. It is then that the elf remembers the secret of the straight road. When the world was changed at the downfall of Numenor, the shape of the earth was bent. The flat world became round. The lands of Valinor were removed from the physical circles of the world, placed beyond the reach of mortal ships. When men sail west, they circle the globe and return to where they started. They remain trapped in the curvature of the earth. But the elves were given a loophole in the laws of physics. They were permitted to find the straight road, the tangent that leaves the curvature of the earth and sails through the air and the void to the ancient west. For thousands of years, this journey was made by ship. The white ships of Círdan the shipwright would leave the grey havens and vanish into the uttermost west. But there are no more ships. The grey havens are gone, buried under the silt of the Gulf of Lune. Their towers crumbled, their quays rotted. There is no Círdan to guide the way. There is no wood to build a hull that can withstand the void. So how does a lingerer leave? They must walk. The final severing is an act of supreme faith. The elf must travel to the western shores, to the places where the ancient harbours once stood. They must stand on the edge of the modern ocean, amidst the rusted trawlers and the smell of diesel fuel and rotting plastic. They must look out at the grey, churning Atlantic, which looks to all the world like a cold, empty grave. And they must choose to step off the edge of the world. To a human observer, nothing happens. A gust of wind blows off the pier. A patch of mist dissolves in the morning sun. But in the metaphysical reality, a profound transition is occurring. The elf steps onto the water. They do not sink. They are no longer subject to the gravity of the round world. They are tuning their frequency to the music of the ancient West. They begin to walk, not on the water, but on the memory of the water, the straight road that still exists in the ether, rising imperceptibly from the surface of the ocean. As they walk away from the shore, the noise of the human world begins to fade. The static of the radio waves, the roar of the engines, the psychic screaming of the cities, it all drops away. Silence returns, a silence that is not empty, but pregnant with peace. The grey sky tears open. The heavy, leaden clouds of the modern atmosphere roll back like a curtain. The light changes. It is no longer the harsh yellow light of the sun, nor the pale reflected light of the moon. It is a silver light, clear and sharp, a light that does not cast shadows, but illuminates the essence of things. The Fair, which has been starving for millennia, suddenly draws a breath of true air. The phantom pain of the missing body vanishes. The houseless spirit begins to manifest a form again. Not a body of flesh and blood, perhaps, but a raiment of memory, a projection of the self as it was in the prime of its power. The scars of the fading are washed away. The madness of the lingerer is healed by the proximity to the blessed realm. They walk up the path of light, leaving the curve of the earth behind. They look down one last time at the world of men, a blue marble wrapped in storms, a beautiful, tragic, dying thing. They feel a final pang of pity for the second-born, who must live and die in the shadows, who must struggle without the memory of the light. They realize that the gift of men was indeed a mercy, for it allowed humans to leave the circle quickly, before the weight of the world could crush them. And then they turn their back on Middle-earth forever. Ahead of them, rising from the sea of night, is the green hill of Tuna. The white towers of Tyrion gleam like pearls. The sound of bells comes drifting across the void, a sound of welcome. They have returned to the timeless. They have escaped the trap. The story of their sorrow is over. The story of their healing begins. But what of those who never leave? What of the lingerers who are too broken, too corrupted, or too afraid to find the straight road? They remain. They are here now, in the room with you. They are the shadows that lengthen in the evening. They are the inexplicable sorrow you feel when walking through an old forest. They are the silence in the deep caves. They are fading, atom by atom, memory by memory, dissolving into the background radiation of the world. They will endure until the Dagor Dagorath, the battle of battles at the end of time, silent witnesses to a history that has forgotten them. This is the ultimate fate of the elf in Middle-earth. To be a stranger in their own land, a ghost in their own home, a keeper of secrets that no one wishes to hear. It is a destiny of absolute loneliness. And so, if you ever feel a sudden chill in the air on a warm summer day, or hear a snatch of song on the wind that sounds like no language you know, do not be afraid. It is only the fading. It is only the last echo of a beauty that was too perfect to survive in a world of men. It is the grief of the firstborn, lingering still, waiting for the end of the world.